World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Mages were actually the second class that I started putting together upgrades for. Partly that's because while I was explaining the upgrade concept in some of my earlier videos, I came up with a few upgrade concepts for Frost Mages, so I figured I should start by building on that. I've noticed that one of my go-to tricks for inventing upgrades is to combine an existing spell with a new damage type. I do that with Shaman a lot too, you can imagine. I don't do that with every spell, of course. That would be too obvious and, ironically for all the flavor changes, too monotonous. But there are quite a few spells in here that mix damage types. Frostfire damage is nothing new, but I'm calling Fire plus Arcane Spellfire damage, and I'm calling Frost plus Arcane Prismatic damage. And when I want to combine all 3 types, yes, I couldn't resist mimicking Khadgar, I call it Prismfire damage. With all that context out of the way, let's dive into the upgrades I cooked up so you can tell me which ones are awesome, which ones are meh, and which ones are cringe. Frost is actually the first one I cooked up upgrades for, and the first 3 are taken straight from my earlier videos explaining the upgrade system. The first is Prismatic Spray, an upgrade for Cone of Cold that has a longer range and significantly more damage with a short cooldown. It also has random chances to instantly and automatically cast Frostbolt, Frost Nova, Flurry, Fire Blast, or Ice Lance on the target. It doesn't consume icicles, but deals damage as if it had consumed all the icicles you have. The second upgrade is also an upgrade to Cone of Cold, Frostbolt Volley. It has a much longer range with a 1-minute cooldown, and you can imagine it's pretty good at generating a lot of icicles in a hurry. The third upgrade is Frostfire Bolt, an upgrade for Frostbolt that deals slightly more damage and applies a small damage over time effect to the target. It still slows the target as well. The fourth upgrade is Ice Jam. It's an upgrade for Blizzard that deals slightly less damage but deals it over a much shorter period of time, technically doing the same number of ticks of damage total. The fifth upgrade is Frostfire Blast, an upgrade for Fire Blast that is guaranteed to trigger Brain Freeze. The sixth upgrade is Frostfire Orb, an upgrade for Frozen Orb that has a lower chance to apply Fingers of Frost, but it has a chance to apply Brain Freeze. The final upgrade is Nullify. It's an upgrade for Counterspell where, if you successfully interrupt a target, you temporarily silence them. Now for the thinking. Cone of Cold doesn't even get mentioned on Icy Vein's rotation page. It doesn't even suggest using Cone of Cold while you're moving. I figure the Cone of Cold spell needs some love. The plan was for it to be useful as some added AoE sustain with Prismatic Spray, which is another classic spell from Dungeons & Dragons, or with Frostbolt Volley, which was meant to provide a different trade-off with more burst, since Frostbolt Volley is meant to provide a bunch of icicles and chances to proc Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze. I should say that I added the randomization to Prismatic Spray because, well, the Dungeons & Dragons version of Prismatic Spray was all about randomization. If we don't like randomization around here, I could take it out. Just because it works one way in one game doesn't mean it has to work that way in every game, after all. Frostfire Bolt is a spell that was removed a while ago. Once upon a time, every fireball provided a small damage over time effect, so Frostfire Bolt is intended to do slightly more damage than Frostbolt by drawing in some of that old fireball flavor. It's also meant to look noticeably different, though I think I should say here that I'm well aware that when Warlords of Draenor rolled over into Legion, Frostfire Bolt was changed into Flurry. So, those of you who were there are probably wondering why I'm upgrading Frostbolt to Frostfire Bolt instead of upgrading Flurry. Well, the thinking was that Frostbolt is more of a bread and butter ability, and I'd wanted to upgrade your bread and butter abilities first. If players prefer that I upgrade Flurry instead, then I will do that. Flurry is part of your rotation after all, unlike Cone of Cold. Ice Jam, well, Blizzard is a staple of the multi-target rotation, so I figured it would work situationally in fights that were more mobile. That was the intended trade-off, though I wonder if I should have made it so that Ice Jam could function as an icicle-consuming multi-target finisher instead of a multi-target cooldown, or maybe a plain old multi-target spell that dealt more damage in a smaller area of effect. If I get feedback telling me to change the trade-off, I will fall in line and I will make the changes that I am asked to make in the next iteration. And as a bit of an aside, I would like to add that when I thought up the name for this upgrade, I had not intended it as a commentary on Blizzard Entertainment's managerial style, but, well, moving right along, I am getting into a rut of blending fire and frost damage here, aren't I? Well, Frostfire Blast is meant to shake up the rotation a little, let you sneak in some extra flurries, or Frostfire Bolts if you tell me to turn Flurry into Frostfire Bolt instead of Frostbolt. Actually, shoot, that would be some pretty nice flavor, having Frostfire Blast lead into Frostfire Bolt, wouldn't it? Again, I will do what the feedback asked me to do in the second iteration. If you like Frostfire Bolt upgrading Frostbolt, it'll upgrade Frostbolt. If you want it upgrading Flurry, then that's what's going to happen. Frostfire Orb is, that's another removed ability. It'll deal damage over time and again do a bit more damage than Frozen Orb would do. My earlier draft had no nuance to it, so when I was going through these again to make sure I wasn't recycling names of PvP talents or something, I decided to change Frostfire Orb so that there's less chance of Fingers of Frost and instead a chance of Brain Freeze. I literally did that just to make it different. If that was the wrong move, please do let me know. But the more I think about it, the more I think that having Frostfire damage abilities like Frostfire Blast and Frostfire Orb feed into Frostfire Bolt, you know, the more I think about it, the more it feels like that flavor really works. But anyways, Nullify was another of many examples of me running out of ideas after I'd gotten several upgrades in place. I figured going and getting a utility ability and giving it an upgrade was a pretty good idea. Plenty of interrupts throughout World of Warcraft's history have had silences as talentable upgrades, so I figured, why not? Now, at the time I'm writing this, I've created a kind of a first draft for each of the specs, and I'm taking a second pass at them to double-check to see if I can spot any more problems. And one thing I remember is that for plenty of specs, I often start to run out of ideas after coming up with, say, 4 to 6 upgrades. At the time, I took that as a challenge to get creative, and I often looked for utility abilities or cooldowns or crowd control that I could upgrade. I don't know whether I should have taken it as a sign that creating 7 upgrades for each spec was too much of a good thing. I don't know. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Looking at this spread of upgrades through the lens of what goals can I accomplish with these, I have one choice of upgrades that, so far in my goal-oriented review, is unique. A choice of Burst versus Sustain with Prismatic Spray versus Frostbolt Volley. Maybe I should have more upgrades that deal with Sustain versus Burst in terms of their trade-offs. I don't know. Feedback will tell me for this class and for others. As far as multi-target damage goes, Frostfire Orb, either Frostbolt Volley or Prismatic Spray, and Ice Jam work just fine. Single-target upgrades only include Frostfire Bolt and Frostfire Blast. Then again, Frozen Orb is part of the single-target rotation, so I suppose it counts legitimately as a single-target upgrade. I guess this isn't so bad for my first try. I suppose it was beginner's luck, since the first class other than my own that I attempted to cook up upgrades for was the Mage class, and Frost was the first spec I took a stab at, but I should not pat myself on the back until and unless I get feedback telling me I did a good job. And even if I did do a good job, there's gotta be room for improvement. And I'm open to feedback for how to improve this in iteration 2. Another thing I wanted to talk about is one of the things that personally appealed to me was adding volley spells. Spells that throw a lot of projectiles at enemies. Fireball Volley and Frostbolt Volley are the ones that I added for mages. Arcane Barrage more or less counted as one of these volley spells from the beginning. Shaman got Lightning Bolt Volley in their spread of upgrades, Paladins got Holy Wrath, Warlocks got Shadow Bolt Volley, Druids, they've got the option of picking up a multi-target Freya's Wrath upgrade. I mean, maybe I'm thinking with a vanilla mind a little too much, but I remember seeing these volley spells when NPCs were casting them and thinking they were cool. And plenty of times in World of Warcraft's history, the devs took something cool that NPCs could do, e.g. the Flame Orb ability that I have here, and then enabled players to do it too. The devs haven't added any of the volley spells yet, so I figured now's a good time to sneak them in. Though NPCs haven't really had those kinds of volley spells since the Burning Crusade. Ah well, they still look awesome. But of course, just because I think something looks awesome for a given spec doesn't necessarily mean players of that spec will agree with me. I am prepared to make changes, even if they have me move away from Bolt Volley upgrades, though it'll make me sad. If I am told to do so by they that know better than I will remove them. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what'll actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.